if you're a bank angler, or any angler for that matter, and you're not using the Tokyo Rig, you are missing out. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to rig it, what it is, and how to fish it. Let's get started. My name is Wesley Littlefield with YourBassGuy.com, and today we're talking about the Tokyo Rig. And it's becoming one of my favorite rigs to throw, simply because of its incredible versatility. On the Tokyo Rig, you can throw just about any soft plastic that you want, and unlike a jig, you can throw it in muddy, silty bottom, and that is probably the biggest advantage that a Tokyo Rig has over any other rig. As I mentioned, the Tokyo Rig is very versatile, and that's because it combines all the best attributes of the Texas rig, a drop shot, a swim bait, and a punch or flipping rig. You can use the Tokyo Rig in all the same scenarios that you would all of these other rigs and lures, but yet you don't have to switch, and that's what makes the Tokyo Rig so great. So what the heck am I talking about? The Tokyo Rig is really simple in the fact that it's just a hook with a soft plastic. It's a EWG, or an extra wide gap hook, and then there is a solid ring that goes through the eye of the hook that connects to a swivel that you tie your line to, and then it also connects to a straight wire where you put your weights. Let's move on to how to rig the Tokyo Rig. So first of all, it's going to be very similar to how you rig a Texas rig. You're going to need to run your hook through the top of the soft plastic just as it starts to bend. Come out of the soft plastic, run it all the way to the top of the hook, find where it needs to go through the soft plastic. I always put my thumb right there and come through the soft plastic all the way through it. And now I'm going to just barely skin hook that tip back in there to make it weedless. And that's rigging the Tokyo Rig. Now, the beauty of the weights is you can add as much or as little as you need. You know, you can either run an 1/8 ounce weight, or you could run 2 1-ounce weights, or even just one big 2-ounce weight. It really depends on your situation. So if you're punching, you're gonna want to have heavier weight. But if you're, fishing pretty shallow and you don't need it to sink really fast, then go with a 1/8 ounce weight. That is another reason that the Tokyo Rig is just so versatile. Now, one tip when you're putting on the weights, if you're just doing one weight, do the pointy end down, pointed down. That way, when it hits the water, it's still more likely to punch through some of that vegetation. If you're running 2 weights, do the pointy end on the top one up, and on the bottom one pointed it down. The reason I do this is, number one, it gives a little bit of sound to your lure and presentation, and you can quickly adjust how much weight you really need. All right, so now we're gonna talk a little bit about how to fish it, but for that, I'm actually gonna go to the pond and show you how I fish the Tokyo Rig. I made it down to the pond. It is blazing hot. I'm already sweating a ton, so I'm thinking this bait, it might be the key to what we need right now. The sun is just super bright, so we're gonna wanna find some cover, which is ideal for this bait. So I'm gonna throw my GoPro on and go try to catch some fish. All right, so there's several ways to actually fish a Tokyo Rig. And one way, probably one of my favorite ways, to be honest, because I'm a power fisherman, is just to cast it out and reel it back. Now, it's gonna work best if you've got a swim bait or some kind of soft plastic like that, but you can swim back a worm like I'm doing here. Another technique that you can do is dragging it like you would a football jig. So you're just gonna cast it out there, let it sink all the way to the bottom. I've got a lot of weight on it, so it doesn't take long. And I'm just gonna drag it with my rod, and then reel up the slack and drag it with my rod. Reel up the slack, and I might come down here and I might shake it a little bit
and bounce it, I can feel everything on the bottom. But I'm just gonna drag it with my rod all the way back to me. Now the one thing you do want to remember when fishing a Tokyo rig and you get a bite, you do want to set the hook straight overhead or over your shoulder, just because if you try to sweep set it or, you know, try to set it like to the side, it, for whatever reason, it turns the lure just enough and it'll actually end up costing you fish because it just doesn't set the hook nearly as good as coming over the top and over your head. So that's something to remember when you are actually setting the hook. You get the bite, you know, you don't want to set the hook this way. You want to set the hook straight overhead. That's a fish. There we go. Proof that it works. And he had it choked. There he is. So the next technique that I was just about to start talking about is actually to bounce it like you would a jig. So that's what I was doing there. I was, I'm hung up. Oh, got it loose, thank goodness. That's the beauty of the Tokyo rig too. It doesn't get hung up very easily. It will get hung up, but as I was saying before I got hung up too, hopping it. Now to hop it, same kind of like a jig, you know, I'm just pop, 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 hop it off the bottom, reel it down, let it sink back down. And instead of just dragging it with a rod, I'm actually popping it. And letting it sink and pop it again and let it sink. Now I've got a little bit, probably a little too much weight for how shallow my pond is right now, but I do that one because it just drops past that fish so fast. They've got they've got no time to react. They just have to react and bite it. They don't have any time to look at it and think about it. It's there and gone, so they've got to react. And another reason that I've got a little bit of weight on there is because there is a little bit of this stuff around the edge of the pond where fish like to hang out, and I can punch right through it. Right through the middle there. All right, the last technique I'm gonna talk about is drop shotting it, basically. You know, you're gonna work it just like you would a drop shot. Let it sink all the way to the bottom. Have just a slight bow in the line like that, and just wiggle it. And work it back to you. Let it sink, and just wiggle it. Let it sink to the bottom. And you're just gonna sit there and wiggle it. Well, that's how you fish the Tokyo rig. And where you're gonna fish it, I mean, you can tell here at the pond, I've got a little bit of grass. I've got a lot of mucky, nasty bottom. I got hung up, once, maybe twice, but it came out pretty easy. Just let it drop back down and popped it loose really, really easy, considering that I could have been hung up really bad. So there's no terrible place. I would say I don't like the shape of it, like flipping up into really thick brush pile or something. I'm not saying that it won't work, because it definitely will, but just there's too much stuff that could catch on the brush pile that I personally wouldn't use it there. But pretty much anywhere else, I use the Tokyo rig. And it's like I said, it's a great replacement for a jig in a pond, because it keeps your lure up out of the nasty muck where the bass don't want to shove their face into. With that being said, sometimes a jig is the better option in different situations, like for instance, flipping into thick, nasty cover. So if that's something you want to learn how to tie and rig, I've got a video down below me worth checking out. Other than that, I want you guys to always remember that education like this is important, but getting out and fishing is essential.